Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Tuesday, Yom Shlishi. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Tuesday? Yehud in South Carolina, Sharon in New Jersey, Nancy in North Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Shandor in the Bronx, Lucy in Minnesota, Renee in Indiana, Gail in Kansas City, Melissa in Great Neck, Lorraine in Texas, Bella in Florida, Frank in San Pedro, Lester in Florida, Moishi in Brooklyn, Chaim in Florida, Aoife in Florida, Elise in Virginia, and Lynn in Canada. Welcome, everybody. Tonight's class is sponsored by Sarah Toller, in memory of Mama Arlene, who always believed in me. What a beautiful dedication. And maybe it's spelled M-A-M-A-W, Arlene. So maybe it's Mama, like Mama Arlene, who always believed in me. May Mama Arlene's neshama, her soul, have a great elevation in the world of souls. We say Amen. And Sarah, thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. In the merit of that, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And we say Amen. Our daf tonight is Menachot 17. Menachot 17 is our daf. We're picking this up right at the top of page 17a. And with God's help, we'll complete chapter 2 tonight and open chapter 3. And I like this beginning at the top of 17a. So say the sharp people in the city of Pumpadisa. And then it turns out that the law does not follow what the sharp people of Pumpadisa say. But they say, burning renders burning pigul. What does this mean? Burning the handful with the intent to burn the frankincense the next day renders the meal offering pigul. Now, let's remember the basic distinction that we made between the majority opinion of the rabbis and the minority opinion of Rabbi Meir, that with regard to a meal offering, a standard meal offering that has both its handful removed and burned on the altar, and frankincense burned on the altar. And those are the two parts of the permitting factor, or let's say the two permitting factors that are going to enable the remainder of the meal offering to be eaten. So, says Rabbi Meir, if a person had pigul intent during either one, burning the handful or burning the frankincense, to eat from the remainder beyond its time, right? Beyond the deadline. So that would render it pigul immediately, not just disqualified, but abominable, because he had an intent from the outset not to follow God's law in bringing an offering to God. Then, having been rendered pigul, if a person ate from the remainder of that offering that had been rendered pigul, he would be subject to kares, death at the hands of the heavenly court, for eating something that was pigul. And the rabbis say that offering does not become pigul unless, let's say, the priest, at the time of burning the handful and at the time of burning the frankincense, both elements of the permitting factor, or both permitting factors, he would have to have that pigul intent, or that pigul bearing intent, during both permitting factors in order for the meal offering to be rendered pigul. And then if somebody ate of it anyway, he'd be liable to kares. So here we're saying something quite different and very interesting. Now we're talking about that while he's burning the handful, he has in mind to burn the frankincense beyond the time limit of this meal offering, right? He has in mind, while performing one of the permitting factors, to perform the other permitting factor late, beyond its deadline. And according to the sharp people of Pumpadisa, wait a minute. So according to the sharp people of Pumpadisa, it's enough that while he's burning the handful, he has in mind to burn the frankincense beyond the deadline of the offering that would render this offering pigul. Okay, so that's the first ruling. And this, now, according to the Gemara, and this is the law, even according to the rabbis, who say that one does not render an offering pigul with intent occurring during the sacrifice of half of a permitting factor. For example, when sacrificing the handful alone with intent of pigul, that would not render the meal offering pigul. But this situation of while burning the handful, he's thinking, he has an intent that he's going to burn the frankincense beyond its time, seems to be attaching a pigul sparking intent, let's say, during both permitting factors. So according to this view, even the rabbis would agree that this offering has become pigul. And the reason is that this statement applies only when he had that the rabbis who say it will not be rendered pigul unless he had intent during both permitting factors. The reason is that the rabbis say that only where the priest had intent during the sacrifice of the handful to consume the remainder the next day, and the frankincense stands intact, i.e. he had no intent with regard to the frankincense. But here, in this situation, when he had some intent with regard to the frankincense, it was about the frankincense, but while he was burning the handful, it is considered as though he had intent with regard to the entire permitting factor. That is what the sharp people of Pumpadisa say. Rava said, we learn this law in a Mishna as well, right? Rava is coming to support the sharp people of Pumpadisa. Says Rava, we learn this in a Mishna as well. This is the principle in the case of anyone who removes the handful or places the handful in the vessel, or who conveys the vessel with the handful to the altar, or who burns the handful on the altar with the intent to partake of an item whose typical manner is such that one partakes of it, or burn an item whose typical manner is such that one burns it on the altar, and to take it outside its designated area, the meal offering is unfit, but there is no liability for kares. If his intent was to do so beyond its designated time, the offering is pigul, and one is liable to receive kares on account of it. And Rav explains, and what? Is it not correct to say that the law with regard to burning is similar to these, i.e. the removal of the handful, its placement in a vessel, and the conveying? So accordingly, just as with regard to these, whether one's intent was to partake of the remainder the next day or to burn the frankincense the next day, the law is that the offering is pigul. And so too, with regard to burning, whether one's intent was to partake of the remainder or to burn the frankincense the next day, the offering is pigul. Because after all, while he's burning the handful, he is thinking about burning something beyond its time. And the thing that he's thinking about burning beyond its time is something that is customarily burnt, the frankincense burnt on the altar. Now, the frankincense that's burnt on the altar is not part of the remainder of the offering that is typically consumed. And the issue is, it's also not what we would say is sacrificed on the altar, other than as a permitting factor, right? So the fact that we have intent during one permitting factor with respect to another permitting factor, is that really going to render the offering pigul? And the Gemara relates that I'm sorry. Okay. So that is what Rav is saying. So backing up the sharp people of Pumpadisa. Now the Gemara opines. Right? The Gemara says no. With regard to these, whether one's intent was to partake of the remainder or to burn the frankincense the next day, the offering is in fact pigul. But with regard to burning, if one's intent was to partake of the remainder the next day, yes, it is pigul. But if one's intent was to burn the frankincense the next day, it is not pigul, right? It is not pigul. And the Gemara relates that Rav Menachot bar Gada sat before Abaye, and while he was sitting, he said in the name of Rav Chisda, burning does not render burning pigul, right? This is the opposite of what we opened tonight's class with, where we said burning, according to the sharp people of Pumpadisa, burning does render burning pigul. Now Abaye is saying in the name of Rav Chisda, burning does not render burning pigul. So, for example, burning the handful with the intent to burn the frankincense the next day does not render the offering pigul. And this is the law. And this is the law, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says in the Mishna that one renders an offering pigul through intent during the sacrifice of half of a permitting factor. For example, when sacrificing the handful, but not the frankincense with intent of pigul. In other words, Rabbi Meir would say, if while you're burning the handful, you're thinking you're going to eat the remainder of the meal offering, the edible part, beyond its time, beyond its deadline, that would render the offering pigul, even though you'd had no such intent during burning the frankincense. But here, what he's intending to do beyond its deadline is not to consume from the remainder of the offering, rather to bring the other permitting factor late, right? And that is not essentially a pigul intent at all, because he's not thinking about consuming that with, consuming beyond its time. But he is thinking about burning beyond its time. But this is, I think it's this idea of, if you were thinking about burning, like in the case of an animal offering, if at the time of sprinkling, you're thinking about burning the parts that are going to be burned on the altar beyond their time, that would render the burnt offering pigul. But that's because the permitting factor is the blood. Burning a burnt offering on the altar, that's like consuming the edible portions of it, burning the parts that are meant to be burned. But burning a burnt offering on the altar, that's not a permitting factor. That's the actual action of the burnt offering, which you can only do after the permitting factor, right? And so that's why here, when having intent during one permitting factor regarding another permitting factor, does not create pigul. And this is the law even according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says in the Mishnah that one renders an offering pigul through intent during the sacrifice of half a permitting factor. For example, when sacrificing the handful, but not the frankincense with intent of eating from the remainder of the offering beyond its time. Rav Menachot bar Gada explains that the reason is that this statement of Rabbi Meir applies only where he had intent during the sacrifice of the handful to do what? To consume the remainder on the next day, as the handful is their permitting factor. But here, in the case we've been discussing tonight, as the handful is not a permitting factor of the frankincense, the offering cannot be rendered pigul through it. Abaye said to Rav Menachot, "Answer me, my master. Did Rav Chisda state this law in the name of Rav?" And Rav Menachot said to Abaye, "Yes." And the Gemara notes that it was also stated explicitly that Rav Chisda says that Rav says burning does not render burning pigul. Rav Yaakov bar Idi said in the name of Abaye, we learn in the Mishnah as well that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rav. If one slaughtered one of the lambs with the intent to partake of it the next day, the lamb is pigul and the other lamb is fit. Remember that the lambs of Shavuos, that's that very gray area where it's unclear what's a permitting factor for what. Generally, we take it that the lambs are a permitting factor for the loaves. Even though the loaves are a meal offering, the loaves of Shavuos are the most important offering because they permit the new crop of wheat to the nation. If he slaughtered one lamb with the intent to partake of the other lamb the next day, both lambs are fit. And what is the reason? Is it not due to the fact that since the first lamb is not a permitting factor of the second lamb, the two lambs are a permitting factor of the loaves. They're not permitting factors of each other. Therefore, having in mind to eat the second lamb beyond its time while slaughtering the first lamb, that's not going to render that lamb pigul. And the same reason should apply to the case of the handful and the frankincense. But the Gemara says, no, that logic breaks down. There is a difference between these cases. It is only there in the Mishnah that one lamb cannot render the other pigul, as it was not fixed in one vessel with the other lamb, and therefore each animal stands independent of the other. But here, as the handful and the frankincense were fixed in one vessel for the purpose of offering them, they are considered like one item, and one of them therefore could render the other pigul, but we'd end up not holding that way. Rav Hamnuna said, Rabbi Chanina helped me internalize this following matter, and to me, it is equivalent to all the rest of my learning, as it contains a significant novelty. I don't know if he was being, I think, a little bit hyperbolic, that this is a very specific type of legal ruling, but it amazed him. I don't know if he would consider the equivalent of everything else he learned in his life put together, but let's see. He says, this was the important teaching that amazed him. Rav Hamnuna said, if one burned the handful with the intent to burn the frankincense the next day, and he burned the frankincense with the intent to partake of the remainder the next day, then the meal offering is pigul. Now this is interesting. While he's burning the handful, he has an intent to burn the frankincense beyond its time. Now that will not render the whole meal offering pigul, but he had an intent to burn something late while he was burning the handful, even though it was the other permitting factor. But then, when he burns the frankincense, and I don't think there's any indication here that he actually did burn the frankincense the next day. I think he burns the frankincense on time. And while he's burning the frankincense, now he has intent to consume from the meal offering, actual pigul intent. So he has a pigul intent during the burning of the frankincense. So now, during both burning the handful and burning the frankincense, he had in mind to do something beyond the deadline. During the handful, to burn the frankincense late. During the frankincense, to eat from the meal offering beyond its time. And now, we will combine those two intents and say that the meal offering is rendered pigul. And the Gemara asks, what is Rabbi Chanina teaching us? If he is teaching us that burning renders burning pigul, well then let him simply say, if one burned the handful with intent to burn the frankincense, the offering is pigul. So he must be saying something different. If he is teaching us that one renders an offering pigul through intent during the sacrifice of half of a permitting factor, like Rabbi Meir would say, well then let him say, if one burned the handful with intent to partake of the remainder the next day, the offering is pigul. He said more than that. If he is coming to teach us both of these laws, let him say, if one burned the handful with intent to burn the frankincense or to partake of the remainder the next day, the offering is pigul. But that's not what he said. He had a more complex hybrid case. So Rav Ada bar Ahava said, actually, Rabbi Chanina holds that burning does not render burning pigul, and therefore if one burned only the handful with intent to burn the frankincense the next day, the offering is not pigul. And he also holds that one does not render an offering pigul through intent during the sacrifice of half of a permitting factor, like Rabbi Meir says. And consequently, if one burned only the handful with the intent to partake of the remainder the next day, the offering is not pigul either. But it is different here in this hybrid case, as intent of pigul has extended over the entire meal offering. as he had intent of pigul during the burning of the handful with regard to the frankincense, and during the burning of the frankincense with regard to the remainder. And the Gemara relates that a Tana taught a Baraisa before Rav Yitzchak bar Abba, if one burned the handful with the intent to partake of the remainder the next day, everyone agrees that the meal offering is pigul. And the Gemara raises a difficulty, but doesn't Rabbi Meir and the rabbis don't Rabbi Meir and the rabbis disagree in the Mishnah with regard to this very case? Rather say that the Baraisa states everyone agrees that the offering is disqualified, as although the rabbis hold that such intent does not render an offering pigul, they concede that it disqualifies the offering. And the Gemara challenges, but if one must amend the Baraisa, let him say that the Baraisa states it is pigul, and that it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara responds, well, it is reasonable that the Tana taught that everyone agrees, and that he accidentally exchanged the word pigul for disqualified. But he would not confuse the phrase, this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, with the phrase, everyone agrees. Some mistakes, okay, he meant to say disqualified, he said pigul. That's an understandable mistake. But he's not going to, say everyone agrees when he meant to say Rabbi Meir states, or vice versa. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 6, and with it, chapter 2. We move on to chapter 3. And before we open it, I'm just going to read to you a couple of relevant passages from the Torah. So Leviticus chapter 2, verses 1 through 6 states this. And when one brings a meal offering unto the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it, and put frankincense upon it, and he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. And he shall remove his handful of its fine flour, and of its oil, together with all its frankincense. And the priest shall make its memorial part smoke upon the altar, an offering made by fire, of a pleasing aroma to the Lord. But that which is left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. Right? Who eats the remainder? The priests do. It is most holy of the offerings of the Lord made by fire. And when you bring a meal offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour mingled with oil, or unleavened wafers spread with oil. And if your offering is a meal offering baked on a griddle, it shall be of fine flour, unleavened, mingled with oil. And you shall break it in pieces and pour oil on it. It is a meal offering. And now Leviticus 2, verse 13. And every meal offering of yours, and every meal offering of yours, you shall season with salt. Neither shall you suffer the salt of the covenant of your God to be lacking from your meal offering. You shall sacrifice salt with all your offerings. Okay. I think that would have been useful to read even before chapter 2 and even before chapter 1. But I think now we appreciate it so much more, having delved into so many questions that arise from that passage that establishes the law of the meal offering. Okay, now, page 17a, chapter 3, Mishnah 1. In the case of one who removes a handful from the meal offering with the intent to consume beyond its designated time, already sounds like pigul, right? At the time of removing the handful, having intent to consume beyond its designated time. Sounds like a recipe for pigul, but he does this with an item, right? He has an intent to consume beyond its designated time, an item whose typical manner is such that one does not consume it, i.e. the handful. Or to burn beyond its designated time, an item whose typical manner is such that one does not burn it on the altar, i.e. the remainder. Then the meal offering is fit. It's not only not pigul, it's not even disqualified, right? So if at the time that he removes the handful, he's thinking to himself, I'm going to eat from the handful tomorrow, right, beyond its time. Well, we don't eat the handful. The handful gets burned. Or if he has in mind at the time that he is removing the handful, that he's going to burn the remainder on the altar beyond its time. That is not pigul, and that is not even disqualifying, because the remainder of the meal offering doesn't get burned on the altar. So this is a meaningless intention. And Rabbi Eliezer deems it unfit. Although it is not pigul, and consuming it is therefore not punishable by excision from the world to come, kares, nevertheless, according to Rabbi Eliezer, this mistaken intention is enough to render it unfit, but he's in the minority. Continues the Mishnah, in the case of one who removes a handful from the meal offering with intent to consume beyond its designated time, an item whose typical manner is such that one does consume it. Okay, now he has in mind to eat from the remainder. That's that is what we eat, or that is what the priests eat. Or to burn beyond its designated time, an item whose typical manner is such that one does burn it on the altar. But his intent was to consume or burn improperly less than an olive bulk. The offering is fit. Not only doesn't become pigul, doesn't even become disqualified, it remains fit, because his intent to eat something that normally is eaten on time, and he's going to eat it beyond its time, but what he's intending to eat is less than the minimum measure, so it doesn't affect it. If his intent was both to consume half an olive bulk and to burn half an olive bulk beyond its designated time, the meal offering remains fit, because eating and burning do not join together such that this intent with respect to half an olive bulk of each could not be joined to the other half olive bulk to create the minimum measure in order to create pigul, but we don't join them because eating and burning do not join together. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, what is the reason for the ruling of Rabbi Eliezer that the intention to consume beyond its designated time an item that is not usually consumed would nevertheless render the meal offering unfit? Not pigul, but unfit. Why does Rabbi Eliezer say that? And the verse states, with regard to consuming an offering after its designated time, and if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings is at all consumed, he'achol ye'achel, repeating for emphasis the term for consumption. So he derives from the repeated term that the verse is speaking of two types of consumption. One is the consumption of the offering by a person, for example, by the priest or the owner of the offering if it was a peace offering. And the other one is the consumption of the sacrificial portions by their being burned on the altar. And this serves to tell you that just as one's improper intention with regard to the consumption of a person renders the offering unfit, so too one's improper intention with regard to the consumption of the altar renders the offering unfit. Right? Again, the concept is that when you burn something on the altar, it's like heaven is eating, right? It's like God is eating. God is consuming what is burned on the altar, and therefore would come under the definition of consuming, according to this view of Rabbi Eliezer. Now, what is... And furthermore, this serves to tell you... Wait a minute. Yeah. And furthermore, this serves to tell you that just as one's improper intention that a portion of the offering designated for consumption by a person will be consumed on the following day by a person renders the offering unfit, and one's improper intention that a portion of the offering designated for consumption of the altar will be consumed on the following day by the altar renders the offering unfit, so too one's improper intention that a portion of the offering designated for consumption by a person will be consumed on the altar renders the offering unfit, and one's improper intention that a portion of the offering designated for consumption of the altar will be consumed on the following day by a person would also render the offering unfit, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Now, what is the reason for this derivation? It is derived from the fact that the Merciful One expresses the burning of the offering using the language of consuming. And the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer maintain the following. This fact that the Merciful One expresses the burning of the offering using the language of consuming demonstrates that there is no difference if one expresses his intention using the language of consuming on the altar, and there is no difference if one expresses his intention using the language of burning on the altar. Therefore, if the priest removed the handful from the meal offering while expressing the intention that it should be burned on the altar the following day, whether this intention was phrased as consumed on the altar or burned on the altar, the offering is pigul. That's what the rabbis do with this language of consuming when it comes to burning on the altar. But what they don't say is that if he had intent to eat that which is burned, that could create pigul, because consuming is not the same. Even though the language might be used for the altar in that way, it means two different things, and the rabbis, the majority, will not create pigul when you're planning to burn that which is normally eaten or to eat that which is normally burned beyond its time. Now, alternatively, this doubled expression, right, about consuming, which is based on the word to eat, and it's doubled, right, like usually we translate that indeed or verily or surely, but it always invites interpretation from the sages. Alternatively, the doubled expression serves to teach that just as one renders the offering pigul only when one's intention involves the consuming of that minimum measure, an olive bulk, as this is, and why? Where do we get this? Because that is the minimum measure for something to be considered eating. If you eat less than that, you might be tasting, you might be putting a little bit of food on your lips, but you're not eating. But as a legal matter. But where am I? Yeah. Alternatively, the doubled expression serves to teach that just as one renders the offering pigul only when one's intention involves the consumption of an olive bulk, as this is the minimal measure for an act to be considered eating, so too, one renders the offering pigul only when one's intention involves the burning of an olive bulk. But actually, the expression for consumption found in the verse indicates consuming it in the usual manner. And therefore, an offering is rendered unfit only if one's improper intention, in terms of beyond its time, involved consuming an item that is usually consumed or burning an item that is usually burned. We don't swap those. And what would Rabbi Eliezer respond? He would say that if it were so that the verse intends to teach only that law, let the merciful one write either if he'akol or if ye'achel, repeating the same form of the word twice. What is the reason that the verse states he'achol ye'achel, employing both repetition and variation? Learn from this formulation two laws. One, as the rabbis explain, is that the offering is rendered unfit, whether one uses an expression of consumption or an expression of burning, as he formulates the intent in his head, provided that one's intention is with regard to at least an olive bulk. And the second law we learn from the doubling is that the offering is rendered unfit if one intends to burn on the altar an item that is usually consumed by a person or to consume an item that is usually burned. That's Rabbi Eliezer's point. The rabbis don't agree with him. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. So Rabbi Zera said to Rav Asi, but if the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer is due to that derivation, and he understands that the verse equates the improper intent to consume an item that is usually consumed with the improper intent to consume an item that is usually burned, then let one also be liable to receive kares for consuming an offering brought with intention to consume after its designated time, the part of the offering that is burned or intention to burn after its designated time, an item that is usually consumed. Why does Rabbi Eliezer state only that the offering is rendered unfit? Right? Why does he only go as far as to say it's unfit? Why does he go further and say pigul? Right? And if you would say that indeed Rabbi Eliezer does hold that one who consumes such an offering is liable to receive kares, that is difficult. But aren't you the one who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer concedes that doing so is not punishable by kares, and therefore not pigul, only unfit. And Rav Asi said to him, it is a dispute between Tanaim as to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. There's one who says that Rabbi Eliezer deems the offering to be unfit by Torah law, and one is liable to receive kares. It was in accordance with this opinion that Rabbi Yochanan cited the proof from the verse. And there is one who says that Rabbi Eliezer deems the offering to be unfit by rabbinic law, and it was in accordance with this opinion that Rabbi Yochanan said that according to Rabbi Eliezer, there is no punishment of kares for this transgression, as it is taught in a baraisa. In the case of one who slaughters the offering with intention to drink some of its blood. Do we drink blood? No, we never drink blood. So this would be consuming something that is not meant for consumption. Right? In the case of one who slaughters the offering with the intention to drink some of its blood, which is designated to be presented on the altar, and he has this intention to do it on the next day, or to burn some of its meat, that meat which is normally eaten, on the next day, or to eat some of its sacrificial portions, which are supposed to be burned on the altar, on the next day, then in all these cases, with respect to animal offerings, the offering remains fit, as his intention is either to eat an item that is usually sacrificed on the altar or to burn on the altar an item that is usually eaten. Very equivalent to what we're saying here with the first Mishna of chapter 3 of Menachot. We learned that in Tractate Zevachim. But Rabbi Eliezer deems the offering unfit. If one slaughters the offering with the intent to leave some of its blood for the next day, but not to present it or consume it, Rabbi Yehuda deems the offering unfit. Rabbi Eliezer said, even in this case, Rabbi Eliezer deems the offering unfit, and the rabbis deem it fit, as if this intention was meaningless. That's what I've got for us today, and I'm just seeing one comment from Lucy. It looks like the sages are using all the possible permutations of possible errors. Just so, right? Just so. They're looking at every way in which you can formulate an improper intent. An improper intent with respect to an item that is normally burned, but you're thinking you're going to eat it. Or an improper intent with respect to an item that is normally eaten, but you're planning to burn it. Your intent is with only respect to the minimum measure or less than the minimum measure. Your improper intent is with respect to beyond its time or outside of its place. Your intent could be for this offering, but having in mind a different offering, right? They look at all the different ways that people can mess it up, and then they say, well, probably somebody will make this mistake. The question for us is, what is the ruling, right? What is the consequence of that mistake? And they're trying to figure out all the possibilities. Late breaking question, Sharon. Something being eaten or something the fire consumes uses the same verb in Hebrew, ochel, right? That term of consumption. Think of the burning bush. It was on fire, but lo ochel, it was not consumed by the fire. Is this why the rabbis are attempting to be so definitive here? Right, and so the distinction that they made tonight, which is a wonderful little nuance, right, is that they're going to say this doubling of that root, ochel, is not going to teach, as Rabbi Eliezer might say, that if he had intent to burn something that is normally eaten, that can create a pigul type of intent, because consumption can apply either to burning what is normally burned or to eating what is normally eaten. However, that we will learn out from the fact that they use that same verb, that if the priest is thinking in his mind that I am going to, burn something beyond its time that is normally burned, but he used a different version of the word, like some other synonym that is about eating, or he's thinking that, he's going to, that he's going to burn beyond the time that it should be burned, and he's using the verb for eating, but he's thinking about burning, then the fact that he formulated that way in his mind is not going to cancel out this intention that would otherwise create pigul, right? So the rabbis are being very precise on when this coincidence of terminology between burning and eating actually sort of bridges the gap between burning and eating. That's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, see you tomorrow, Wednesday, regular Wednesday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a good night.